Hey everyone, it's Lady Kaylah here, and today I am going to do a book review. Yay, I got back into reading, so let's hope my depression doesn't get in the way of that again. And the book I read took me quite a while to get through because my mental health has been kind of up and down, but I read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, a novel by Susana Clarke. Now, I was first exposed to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell through a Netflix adaptation, and I just happened across it. I wasn't even sure I was going to like it, and I ended up loving it. I didn't even know that there was a book. So I was in my favorite local used bookstore, and I just so happened upon Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, the novel. And I thought, wow, what is the coincidence that my tiny local used bookstore would have a novel on a series that I just watched. So I was excited about it, and so yeah, let's get into it. First of all, I thought that the book was very similar to the show. I think like they tried their best to stay true to it, even though it was like sped up significantly for the show. I don't remember the ending of the show all too well, so I can only like give you guys vague comparisons. So that's my vague comparison on that. As for the book as a standalone, it was very descriptive. Tolkien himself kind of likes to draw out some details for like world building and just for like painting pictures, and Susana Clarke kind of takes that same kind of style where she will go into details that might be considered like unnecessary in order to create a more detailed picture of the scenario. So sometimes I think it's a little overboard with the descriptors, but it never really turned me off from reading the novel. This novel does something interesting where, let me see if I can find a picture, not a picture, a page with an example of what I'm going to talk about. It does this interesting thing where it will have footnotes at the bottom where it will further explain certain details about the history or some background information on certain scenes that she writes about, and I thought that was really, really interesting. And some of the footnotes are like super long, so it makes me wonder how big the book would be if the footnotes were taken out. But I actually like the footnotes. I like world building. I like to be as immersive as possible. It keeps my interest that way. That's why I never really liked a lot of novels that focused heavily on like war or action, because that's just kind of a focal point of a certain time period where I'm like, I want to be immersed into this entire world, whether it's like the history or the future, or I just like progress, I guess. So this book kind of makes progress all throughout the novel, and I really like that, and I really like how when it does backtrack, it's giving you like more information. And as for storyline, I thought that despite extra details that kind of make you think more is going to happen than what actually happens, I think it really fleshed out a lot of the characters, and I think that the progression of the story was nice and steady, and the resolution was wrapped up really nicely as well. I was actually pretty pleased from start to finish. As for some of my, I guess, criticisms about it, I felt like some of the descriptors that she used were a little out of touch, especially when it came to like people of color in her novel. But it is what it is. I also noted that it was like, I don't know, I thought it was interesting because it was like dated, and she did really well at creating characters for that time period that she chose, and I think it would be kind of like, I want to say like Victorian era-ish, And it's all based in England and all that, so I think she captured the time period pretty well. But at the same time, I felt like some of the reactions may have just come off a little bit cold. Like, the characters I think are really well done, but at the same time, they're almost one dimensional, and I don't notice a lot of character growth throughout the novel, and I don't really notice anything particular about the characters that make them outstanding as characters. It's mostly the story that I found intriguing, and I think that a lot of the characters did have potential to be a lot more than what they were presented as, but it seems like Clarke focused more on the story and story progression and giving you just like enough about each character in order to carry that through. And I think that the actual story part was very well done. And again, my only criticism could be like that the characters came off as a little flat, but I don't know. I feel like it's worth a read. It is quite a big book to get into. But if you are looking for something to take up a good deal of your time, you want something that's drawn out, that will take a while from start to finish, something that's really nicely paced but won't be over in a snap, I can highly suggest this book. And it's going to appeal to people who like that kind of like Victorian era. It's going to appeal to people who do like magicians and magic, but not to the point where it's, I guess, over the top. They don't really get into how the magic works so much. They kind of, go over like magical theory or whatever, but it doesn't really seem to be a huge part of the novel. To the characters, it's a huge part, but it didn't seem to be a huge part for Clarke to like over explain the way that she does magic. So when the characters are making a big deal out of it, it's just like their character quirk. It's not really something that she actually explains in the book. She's kind of just like, yeah, these characters really love learning about magic and magical theory and what else they can do to be more magical. So it's really a really nice novel. I think it's really nice for those who don't want to be too overwhelmed with like an immense amount of magic, but like enough magic to satisfy their fantasy curiosity. So I guess it would be like a step under high fantasy, or a couple of steps under high fantasy in that sense. So if you're not a super huge fantasy nerd, but maybe you want to like dip your feet in, this would be a good novel to do that with. And for those who do like fantasy, it's definitely different from high fantasy. It's like completely different from high fantasy. But if you like to step out of your comfort zone from high fantasy to explore different ways that authors like to play with the concept of magic, I would give it a read. So thank you guys so much for your time. I know my reviews tend to be a little all over the place because I do not ever do a guideline, and I realize now that I probably should have talked about what the book was about before instead of at the very end. But you guys know me, I'm a little quirky, and that's going to be my review for today. Let's see what happens in the future. I'm going to be choosing my new book tonight. Bye!